Hello everyone, welcome to my Black Ops Cold War Realism walkthrough, and this is Mission 6, Desperate Measures. And just like the previous missions, it's going to start off with us in stealth before it escalates into combat. And this is very interesting for Call of Duty, because for this stealth part, they're giving you the ability to go multiple routes. So you have four options at your disposal for getting this stealth section done, and I'm going to choose the option where you need to frame Charkov in order to gain access to his bunker key. I don't know what the other routes are like, but they may be interesting to explore when I get the chance. But for the frame Charkov opportunity, it's going to require you to go down into a room that has two guards in it, accessing a computer in order to print fake evidence. And then you need to give the evidence to Kravchenko, and then he will arrest Charkov, and this will give you the opportunity to pick up his bunker key. And that's the route I did the first time I did this mission, and I'm doing the same thing for this recording. And it's all pretty simple. So there's not much to really say about this stealth sequence, but what I am going to do is I am going to go on a different tangent, and I'm going to talk about Seraphim 17 right now, because he just posted his walkthrough of Black Ops Cold War, and there are some points I need to discuss about him and about his walkthrough. And I think I'll elaborate on some of the other points in the later missions, depending on their length. But there's just a lot to say about Seraphim 17, because at this point, he's just become a shadow of his former self. I don't know what kind of changes went through Seraphim 17's life, but he just doesn't feel like the same person that he was years ago. He was such an interesting person to watch. The games he recorded were very interesting, and he had the right mentality most of the time, but now he's just devolved. It's unbelievable, like, just the way he was criticizing this game, and then with the way he's just criticizing other games, and it's a lot to talk about, let me tell you, and because of that, I just unsubscribed from his channel, and I don't think I'll ever have the urge to watch any of his future videos unless it's related to a game I'm playing at the moment, because he's just reverting back to such an outdated mentality. It's the kind of mentality you would see in like the older generation, and that is the case with Seraphim 17, given that he's just a very old gamer, and he presents with the mentality associated with being a burned out gamer. I just feel like he's burned out with games, and he even admits this. He says he's bored with modern games. He's saying they're too accessible, they're like less difficult, but stuff like that I'm going to elaborate on further in this video. But relating to Cold War, he says that Cold War's campaign is one of the worst campaigns ever, yet he prefers the slower, more boring, cover-based nature of the older Call of Duty games. And I had already predicted that he was going to hate this campaign, and I was correct. I did the same thing with The Last of Us Part 2, because he hated The Last of Us Part 2, and the only reason I knew this was because he hated Uncharted 4, and Uncharted 4 and The Last of Us Part 2 work off very similar mentalities, but I just think at this point he's becoming way too predictable in how he's just going to judge a game, and it just goes to show how much he's devolving. And then when it comes to his walkthrough, he would not use the human shield mechanic for some reason, and he played the game like the older Call of Duty games, which is one of the main reasons why his walkthrough of Cold War is so bad. The kind of strategies he was using just didn't feel like they had any kind of intelligence. Like, his strategies are significantly inferior to the kind of strategies that I showed in my walkthrough. And I don't understand why he's doing this. The only thing I can think of is that he just wants to bring back some remnant of the past, because he's just too much of a COD fan of the olden days. Like, he's such a big fan of COD 4, but COD 4, I don't really see what's so impressive about it. Its gameplay is literally the same kind of gameplay you would see in other Call of Duty games. And then he talks a lot about the multiplayer, but I don't really see what's so appealing about the multiplayer. And just, having your focus be entirely on the multiplayer, and you're using that as a way of judging a game, like, it's so subjective, and I don't really see how you can base your criticism on a game around that. And back to his walkthrough, he often picked the wrong weapon for the job. When I'm using weapons like the recurve bow or the sniper rifle in the previous mission, like, he's using assault rifles and other bad weapons, and he's just not he's not being very intelligent with what he's doing, as I've already explained. And he barely tried to do the stealth encounters. Why would he skip out on the stealth encounters? Why is he trying to ignore all the new mechanics of this game? Why is he trying to play like the older Call of Duty games, which just do not scream ambition whatsoever when it comes to their gameplay? I don't get it. And he's saying this campaign is boring. Well, unlike him, I've actually been enjoying this campaign with the changes to the gameplay, with the things I'm doing in this game when it comes to the story. And, I mean, he did say it was going to be subjective, and he said he has higher taste for these kind of games, whatever that means, and he's very vague about it. But it sounds like lower taste to me, because he just wants Call of Duty to be the same game every time. It's the same with Gears of War. Like, he just wants the same game every now and then, and I just think that's rather pathetic. And moving on to another point, like, it's rather cringeworthy when in his walkthrough he keeps describing the difficulty of this game as being easy, because he'd only be saying that if he considered the older games as being properly designed, which they aren't. The older Call of Duty games embrace a lot of poor designs, and their mechanics are so limited that you just do not have a lot of opportunities to deal with the enemies, and the enemies have all the advantages. They have perfect aim, they have the greater numbers, there's just a lot of really dumb choices with enemy diversity. Like, I don't even know why he's talking about difficulty. Like, difficulty is not the matter being discussed. The matter being discussed is that this game embraces more designs that complement the flow of gameplay, reduces the cheating nature of the AI, and it allows this game to feel different from the other games gameplay-wise. Like, I would not describe Cold War as easy, I would describe it as being better designed to allow for real difficulty, because the older Call of Duty games mainly embraced RNG because of how limited their mechanics were, whereas in this game I feel like it embraces a lot of skill and a lot of intelligence with how you deal with the enemies, with the kind of weapons you use, and with the kind of directions you're supposed to go when it comes to moving through an environment. Like, so far, I've really been feeling like that. But moving on to the next point, he said he wanted the combat encounters to be longer, like the old games, but the combat encounters in the old games were so boring. Like, they dragged on for such a long time, and with the lack of options at your disposal, you were having to sit behind cover and just popping out and shooting enemies, and it was just so boring. And he wants the combat encounters to be long. Like, he's practically expressing the kind of mentality you see in Kill All players, where they try to sacrifice the overall integrity of the gameplay and the quality of the gameplay just to gain a lot of satisfaction from doing a very stupid run. Like, it's stupid. I don't get him whatsoever. And he even describes those combat encounters in the older Call of Duty games as being like shooting gallery moments. Like, he made this statement in the red light, green light mission when you're in the training facility. So apparently to him, spending 15 minutes in one spot just mindlessly shooting enemies is more appealing to him than a shorter, properly thought out combat sequence that rewards skill and analyzing the encounter, and it leaves you excited for the next encounter. Like, for that training facility encounter in red light, green light, like, imagine if there were more enemies. The chances of the developers putting in an enemy diversity that would cause the gameplay to die would be exceedingly high, and the dragged out scenarios would just leave you so bored. Like, I bet he'd think differently if the developers did decide to put in more enemies. And also, he has no respect for pacing when he keeps saying there is not enough combat. Like, that's very subjective, especially coming from someone like him, who is essentially an impatient, old man feeling burned out with gaming, and is desperately trying to reconnect with the past. Like, it feels apropos to that of a drug addict seeking a fix. And it's definitely clear that nostalgia has clouded his judgment. And then we move on to the next point, and he constantly brought up in his walkthrough, like, the whole idea of realism ruining games to counter other people's statements on the matter, but the main problem present in a lot of his statements on realism affecting games is that he keeps relating realism to overall game design rather than just to small mechanics. And because of that, it was just hard to take him seriously when his reference point was incorrect. And furthermore, like, the way he defines realism is hard to understand, and he forgets that there are games that embrace realism correctly for specific mechanics. I mean, look at the Resident Evil series. Resident Evil embraces realistic feedback on weapons. I mean, Resident Evil 4 was such a phenomenal game because of the realistic feedback on the weaponry. And because the realism was used intelligently in Resident Evil, it's one of the main reasons why Resident Evil is such a great series. But he's just not relating realism correctly to gaming, and I just think it sounds more like he's whining rather than actually critiquing the whole idea of realism affecting games objectively. And then on the topic of modern games, like, he wouldn't shut up about modern games being less difficult and more accessible. Yet he comes from a generation where mind-numbing repetitive gameplay reigned supreme and where games were judged as being difficult for all the wrong reasons. So, like I said, nostalgia is clouding his judgments, and I just cannot find any firm ground when it comes to agreeing with his statements. And moving on to the next point, he gives the older Call of Duty games way more credit than they deserve, and I don't know why, because all the older Call of Duty games feel exactly the same. I mean, this game at least tries to stand out from the older Call of Duty games, and it delivers a balanced experience for its difficulty. But the older Call of Duty games just feel exactly the same, with embracing the same RNG aspects, the same kind of set pieces, and repetitive gameplay. Like, I don't really understand why he worships the older Call of Duty games so much, and the only reason I can think of is because he grew up with those games, and when you grow up with something, it's very hard to turn your back to it, and I don't have that kind of problem, thankfully. And going on to the next point, he said that for his walkthrough, he hoped to provide gameplay that would satisfy your viewing needs, yet his gameplay in his walkthrough is on par with that of a testosterone-fueled 6-year-old who just wants to kill things no matter how repetitive and inferior the strategies are. Like, he even says his gameplay is more aggressive, but his gameplay is anything but aggressive. Like, if he's refusing to not use the human shield mechanic to be a lot more aggressive in gameplay, and he instead opts to just hang back and shoot everything till they die, like, that's hardly what I would consider aggressive gameplay. And I think that's all I'm going to say on Seraphim 17 right now, because I've said a lot, and also we're coming across a combat encounter in the moment. But I will have a lot more to say in the later videos, because I have put down a lot of bullets that are worth talking about, based on this walkthrough, and also on other things. But this combat encounter coming up is pretty tricky. There are a lot of enemies, and you need to be very intelligent with your use of the human shield. And this is a difficulty spike, let me tell you. I think this is harder than the red light, green light mission. And unfortunately, I just could not get it on the first try when I was doing the recording. So after I kill these 4 enemies, there's just a transition right here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to rush the right-hand side, and I'm going to grab this guy. And then I need to make sure that I am right near a wall so that the enemies do not ambush me, because the enemies do flank you on this section. So you need to make sure your back is to a wall, your side is to a wall, and use the human shield to your advantage in order to keep the enemies off of you. And just keep pushing forward, because this is how Call of Duty's gameplay should be. It should be aggressive. It should reward, understanding the enemy patterns, understanding where you stand when it comes to dealing with the enemies. And it's just a lot of fun. It's so much better than the slower paced gameplay that the older Call of Duty games support. But push into this room. My human shield is about to break. Whenever your human shield is about to break, you need to terminate him and just grab another guy very quickly. I'm going to push on the right-hand side right here, but I'm going to make sure I clear out some of the enemies. You'll notice I'm taking a lot of damage, but that's just a consequence when it comes to being this aggressive. But as long as I'm moving around and keeping the enemies off of me, I'll be fine. And this is a good spot to take cover at, because my side is covered and my back is covered, and the enemies that are behind me won't be able to shoot me so easily. And there's a couple more enemies right in front of you, and we are almost to the end. And on my first try on this sequence, I managed to run past a lot of the enemies and get over here in about 30 seconds, which was pretty cool, but that's not the best strategy for a walkthrough. And then right here, this is going to demonstrate how good the flash grenades are. They're way better than the concussion grenades. The concussions just don't do anything, and they just don't make the enemies flinch consistently, whereas with the flash grenades, watch this. So if you come to this corner here, and you bounce your flash off the wall, it's going to stun the enemies for a very long duration. Look at this, it's so good. And then there's one guy left, but for some reason his AI is being stupid. He's not trying to shoot me, he's just sitting in cover. And now we have this encounter right here, which is very easy. So swap to your Gallo and then replace it with the hand cannon, because the Gallo doesn't really help out here. And I could have also used the proximity mines and planted them on the ground to keep the enemies off of me. But rather than plant them near the door, I could just plant them right in front of me. But I chose not to do it here. And also, did you see that just then? I prepped my grenade so that I could spawn kill a bunch of enemies, but for some reason when they broke through the door, it canceled my animation out. That is very odd. But look how good the hand cannon is. This weapon is so powerful. It's practically no different to the Annihilator from Black Ops 3 and Black Ops 4. I mean, I think the Annihilator was on Black Ops 4, I could be wrong. But all you need to do for this sequence is stay behind this box while remaining prone, and just shoot the enemies when they decide to rush you. It's really good. This looks like a very intimidating encounter, and in a typical Call of Duty game, this would be one of the worst encounters ever, but because this game is well designed, it's a really fun encounter. I really enjoyed this part. And once Adler has the data he needs, he's going to push forward, and he's going to clear out a couple of enemies. Oh, and be careful of that. So, whenever you're prone, and this is the case in every single Call of Duty game, if any part of your body touches a piece of geometry, it'll say your prone is blocked and you won't be able to turn. It's one of the most frustrating parts about Call of Duty, because it screws with your ability to deal with any enemies that happen to flank you. And I don't know why, after so many Call of Duties, they still insist upon this prone block mechanic. Why can't they just program in a new kind of turning animation when you're prone? I mean, look at Rainbow Six Siege. Rainbow Six Siege gives you completely different animations when you're turning while prone. But they didn't do that with this game? It's dumb. I mean, this game has some really cool mechanics with the human shield mechanic, but they couldn't bother putting in some kind of ability to turn and not be screwed by the geometry while you're prone. It sucks that that mechanic still exists, and I don't like it. But this part right here is easy. Grab that first guy as a human shield, and then use him to terminate the other enemies. And then make sure that you don't kill the enemies too quickly. Once you get rid of your first human shield, grab another guy as a human shield, and then deal with the rest. And then this encounter right here is easy. Grab this first guy, because he's never going to be able to kill you so quickly. The shotguns don't seem to kill you that quickly, and whenever they do put you into the danger state, they seem to pause. Or I might have just gotten lucky, I don't know. But using this human shield, clear out these enemies, and then rather than going straight, go to the left. And it's random whether there's going to be enemies downstairs. And on this recording, I got it where there weren't any enemies downstairs. But always make sure you stay up here and just check downstairs to make sure that there aren't any enemies. There's just a couple of stragglers left, but hug this corner and deal with them in case they decide to show themselves beyond that doorway. And it's all pretty simple, and we're going to gain access to the Juggernaut suit in a moment. And the Juggernaut suit is not that good. It's not at all different. It feels like you're still playing the same way, regardless of whether you have the suit on or not. So it kind of sucks that you don't have increased health on Realism difficulty for this. So you're going to need to proceed with a lot of caution when it comes to doing this sequence. But we have the RPG, and the RPG is a really good weapon. And also, Adler and Belikov will be able to clear out a couple of enemies, because the AI, as long as they're pushing forward, they are a lot more efficient at getting rid of the enemies. But I'm just going to stay with Adler and Belikov, and I'm just going to pick off any enemies that happen to show themselves. And if I do take damage, I will have to take cover. And right now, there's going to be a bunch of enemies right in front of you. There's going to be some enemies descending down the staircase. And then there's going to be a bunch of enemies that bust through a door. And it's all very, very easy. This is just like a spectacle moment. I mean, it does suck that the Juggernaut suit doesn't give you increased health. If it did give you increased health, I feel like it would benefit the more spectacle nature of this section. But at least it's still a simple section, and it's not bullcrap. And now we have this cinematic moment where you're going to get inside the car, and you're going to be shooting at enemies. I don't think you can take damage during this moment, as long as you're laying down suppressive fire. And there's a couple of Juggernauts right in front of you, but Adler is going to be able to kill them easily. And then we have these enemies right here, and once these enemies are dead and we get rid of the car that is chasing us, this will be the end of this mission. So stay tuned for the future missions. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.